currently working for Lazard Asset Management as an Appian consultant. And Appian is a BPM platform that we are currently implementing for our project here at Lazard.
What is BPM?
It's a business process management platform. It's also known as case management. So for example, if you're submitting an application, let's say, for example, for your H-1B or for your green card, there's a bunch of forms that you have to fill out. And as and when the user fills out all of those details in the form actually goes for a review process, correct? So you submit the form and then it goes for a review process. And then there's a back and forth with regards to that review process. And eventually, after the review process is complete, the application is completed and the applicant receives essentially a response with regards to their application. So Appian, Pega, Documentum, these are all workflow management systems. They actually orchestrate this entire workflow from the time the user actually submits an application till the time it actually is under review, and within that review process, there are internal escalations and back and forth of that review process. So Appian essentially is one of those platforms that orchestrates that entire end-to-end business process workflow process. But that being said, as I said, my name is Samir Diaz. I work for Lazard Asset Management as an Appian consultant. And I also do, in my current project, I'm wearing multiple hats. I'm overseeing the entire development of the Appian platform, as well as, I'm also doing a bit of BAing, product management, testing. Depending on the organization that you get hired for, you may be wearing multiple hats. If you're working for a larger organization, you may be working on just one particular work stream, like you may be just a BA and there may be a QA or a product manager and a program manager and a project manager, right? Based on the budget of the project. But then there are certain organizations that do not have all that budgets, and then you wear all these multiple hats. You do a little bit of everything, like you're a jack of all trades. So essentially, I'd like this to be an interactive session rather than just being one-way traffic, right? So let me start off by asking, what do you all know about business analysis? Anyone over here? I just don't want this to be one-way traffic. So, and just feel free to talk about, interact with me, and then I'll also share my screen and we'll go through some examples.
In previous projects, Samir used to work for Department of Labor. So he had access, so he can approve green cards, H-1B for everyone. So he still has the access, even he left project. So he only charges $10,000. Anyone want H1 green card, he can do it, right, Samir?
Yeah, that was very funny. I'm a very small fish in the pond over here. I don't believe in anything what Sachin says, but yeah, but again, nice one there. Ashish, Swarupa, Neha, what do you all know? What is business analysis? Let's start off with that. Let's start off the very high level. What is business analysis? What do you all think is business analysis? And then, we can start from there.
Hi, Samir, Swarupa here.
Hi.
So what is my knowledge is of business analysis? It's like analyzing the business requirement from the client end and analyzing it, coming up with a solution for the problems, and then trying to figure out a plan to deliver them the product.
Okay, good. And anybody else? Okay, so that's right, Swarupa. Essentially, a business analyst is essentially trying to understand a typical interaction between a user and a system, at a very high level. That's what a use case actually means. What is a use case? Use case is nothing but a typical interaction between a user and a system. And from a business analysis perspective, that is exactly what we do. We gather requirements from the business in the context of a business process change or in the context of a technology implementation, and then you write down those requirements and you pass those requirements to the developers. At a very high level, that's what business analysts do. So do you all have or any experience, or have you all heard about the different methodologies that business analysts work with? There's waterfall, there's agile, there's extreme programming, there's IBM prop, rationalized unified process. So there are like 3 or 4 methodologies in the market. Agile is right now, the one that is very, very prevalent. There are some organizations that still do waterfall. There are some organizations that do a mix of waterfall and agile. And then there are some like who do extreme programming, like Facebook, Google, Twitter. They do extreme programming where they really cannot wait that long to deploy their code into production, and so they follow extreme programming methodologies. So do you all have any background in agile, or do you know what agile is? Let me ask you that. Again, just feel free to interact. This is an open forum. I'd like this to be an interactive session, and we can then get into some whiteboarding and stuff.
So agile, as the word itself, is a flexible process, wherein we can when the stakeholder comes with additional new requirement, we can add it to the cycle. Like unlike waterfall, where that couldn't be done.
Absolutely. So essentially, you are trying to be more responsive to the client's needs, because of which you need agile, right? The client may change the requirement or may have enhancements or may in the middle of the project. And then to accommodate these, you need agile so that you can be more responsive to the evolving needs of the client and the customer. Okay, great. So let me try and see if I can share my screen here. We usually use WebEx, and so I'm trying to see where the share button is. Okay.
Samir, how do we you speak pretty well, I mean, I know you have a lot of experience, but how do we speak like you, the way the words you're using, it's so amazing. Like if I hear those, I know you, I know there is no.
So that's a good question, Sachin. So essentially what I did, so I've been working as a BA for over 12 years now. So, so I started off as a BA, and I was a BA till like 2015, 16. And then I transitioned into being an Appian consultant, more or less an Appian solutions consultant. So I primarily work only on Appian projects. And so when I initially started, here's what I did, right? What I used to do is I used to rehearse myself by looking at myself in the mirror, right? I would also record my sessions and play it back to myself to understand where I'm not enunciating well, or where there are too many and between sentences. No matter how much you try to avoid, there'll always be certain big gaps between sentences where you actually say a lot of and things like, let me give you an example now. So I'm talking to a customer and I'm saying, so what I'm trying to understand from the customer is some requirements, right? And I say, hey, Rick, what I'm trying to understand is how about you, so you see the number of ers that come in. So when I initially started 10 years back, I used to say that a lot, okay? And I still do, and everyone does that. So what I used to do is I used to rehearse myself looking in the mirror. I used to record my sessions and I used to play it back to me. And wherever I should say these ers, I would try my best to not say that between sentences. That was one way of learning. The second way is, obviously I used to listen to a lot of BBC and CNN, and that helped me improve my communication skills. And the second thing, and the most important thing is, Sachin, when you go to a requirements gathering session, right, you always try and see that you have those list of questions that you are going to be asking the business, rather than you need to kind of prepare a script before you go to any session, right? You prepare like 8 or 10 questions. And then when you go to the actual meeting, you already have those 8 or 10 questions which you're going to be asking the business. Sometimes it does not go according to script. You know, the business you might ask a question and the business might ask you a subsequent question. So you should, but it always helps that you have a script with you that increases your confidence when you go to a meeting, when you already have a script of questions that you're going to ask the business. So yeah, I mean, look at yourself in the mirror, record your sessions, play it back to yourself, and always try to improve on that, and then re-record it, and then see whether there has been some improvement. And you do that over and over again to better your communication skills. And also write down the number of questions that you're going to ask the business. That way, your confidence in the meeting increases twofold.
Okay, thanks, man.
Yeah,
you're sharing about a share screen about something. So
yeah. Okay. That's my word. Okay. Can you guys see my screen?
Yeah.
Okay, great. So when you start an agile, so let me do this. Switching between Word docs. So when you start a project, right? There's something. Let's say you're an agile. There's sprint 0, sprint 1, the sprint 2.
Samir, if you're typing somewhere, we cannot see your wherever you are, we're just seeing the empty word.
Really? I'm sharing my Word document.
But I see you're typing somewhere, but we don't see it here. We will see only empty Word document.
Can you see it now?
Now it's
okay. So typically we use WebEx and Teams. Surprisingly, this is like the first time I'm using Zoom, whether you believe it or not. I've never used Zoom. So I'm trying to figure out where the share screens are, but it doesn't matter. I mean, okay. So when we start a project, right? If you're starting from scratch, sometimes as a BA, you might be put into sprint 1. Sometimes you may be starting a project when sprint 3 is underway. Sometimes you may be starting a project when sprint 5 is underway. You're not necessarily going to start a project when you're in sprint 0. But if you're fortunate to start a project in sprint 0, then some of the expectations from you as a business analyst or project manager or product owner is that you should be able to identify all of the requirements that the project that you're going to develop in the project in sprint 0, right? Not identify, in detail, but you should be able to identify what you are going to develop in sprint 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and maybe there are 10 more sprints in sprint 0 itself, right? Obviously, there will be more requirements coming in sprint 1, sprint 2, and sprint 3, but you should be able to identify what the backlog of requirements are in sprint 0. At least 80% of what you're going to be developing in the project, right? So let's assume you go over. So I just wanted to let you know, that's why I'm kind of making this over here. Going over. Can you see my Excel screen now? Because I'm moving between two Word document and Excel screen. Can you see my Excel?
No, we can only see your Word.
Oh, so how does it work in Zoom? Like I have to now reshare my Excel. Is that right?
Maybe you could.
Okay.
You probably are sharing only one. So stop sharing and share entire screen. You might be say, yeah, share entire screen, like not everything. So you probably are sharing one application.
Sure. Okay. I think so. I think this is correct. Can you see now? I'm going to flip between Excel and Word. Can you see both? Like I'm going to go to my Word document now. Can you see my Word?
Yep. Now we see it.
Okay, good. And now you see my Excel, correct? Okay, great. Okay, so when you start gathering requirements in sprint 0, remember you're in sprint 0 right now, right? So you need to kind of keep it simple, identify at a high level what those requirements are in an Excel spreadsheet, right? You have other applications like Jira and all that. We'll get into that later, right? So at a very high level, right? Item, description, priority, level of effort.
Samir, can we take an example, like live example of where you're developing this case management so we can get like a little bit better? So the case management application that you're developing, maybe we can take that example and.
Yeah, exactly. So that's right. So I'll give you an example, right? So what we're doing right now is we are Lazard. Let's give another name.
We can call it Wizard.
BlackRock Asset Management, right? And so BlackRock, so there are BlackRock Asset Management it's a huge asset management firm. And let's take an example. Essentially it's investing into various products like mutual funds or equities and stuff like that, right? Now, let's assume BlackRock Asset Management has a client, and the client is General Motors, right? General Motors is investing $100 million in a BlackRock Asset Management mutual funds, right? So what do? When the sales team, there's a sales team at BlackRock, right? We have a sales team here. When the sales team closes in on a sale, and they say, hey, you know what? General Motors has decided to invest $100 million in a BlackRock Asset Management. So what happens? When that happens, General Motors essentially needs to be onboarded to BlackRock Asset Management's systems, right? Let's take an example of you, going to HDFC or ICICI or Bank of America. You go there and you say, hey, I want to set up an account and I want to invest $5 million. So what the HDFC, Bank of America or ICICI executive does is that he gives you a bunch of papers to fill out, right? Even to open up an account at a bank, what do? You fill out 5 to 6 pages of an application, and then an account is opened up, right? So essentially, that's the same thing over here. General Motors is a bigger client, investing $100 million to BlackRock. Okay, now you have 2 things over here. You have BlackRock Asset Management, and you've got the operations team here. So sales has completed its job. They've sold the account. And now what happens? Operations has to onboard General Motors to BlackRock Asset Management's internal IT systems. So that, for example, in the future, if BlackRock wants to increase the $100 million to $150 million, right? So they need to essentially deposit $50 million into that mutual funds as well. So operations is the entity that does all of that back-end work, right? Sales is done. Sales has moved on to another client. Operations takes over, and whether they want to terminate the account, whether they want to transfer funds, whether they want to change the contact that is associated to General Motors. Let's assume Sachin is the contact associated to General Motors. Sachin is a mutual fund manager at General Motors, or a finance manager. And from tomorrow onwards, it's going to change from Sachin to Samir. So operations will have to make that change in the internal IT systems. So essentially, that's where a kind of Appian comes into play, right? Appian, so over here, what they do, the sales team, they access Appian, and here as well. We have Appian. So Appian essentially, we've built a form in Appian. The form is like maybe 5 to 10 pages, right? And that form has approximately 300 fields, right? So the sales team would go in and they will fill out all of that data in these 300 fields pertaining to General Motors. And as and when they fill this data, they submit the form, right? They submit the form. Once they submit the form, operations then reviews this form, and they, and they approve it. Essentially, open up an account. They open up an account for General Motors in this company. So that's pretty much at a very high level, right? End to end. I've just explained to you what at a very high level about General Motors opening up an account at BlackRock, investing $100 million. Sales team fills out a form that consists of 300 fields. Operations get data pertaining to these 300 fields, and then the operations team open up an account for General Motors at BlackRock. At a high level, that was the story, right? Anyways, so getting back to your backlog, right? What I'm explaining right now is very important, because when you go in as a PA or a product manager or a project manager, they'll ask you to create a backlog, right? So you would have to go in and list down the items that you're going to be developing, that your development team is going to be developing. For example, one of the first items is create a form, right? The second item is create, create an application form, right? These are essentially just submit form, right? And then it could be retrieve data from the form, update form, delete form, review form. You can essentially go and create almost as many line items as you want. It could be 50 line items, or it could be, you could just kind of indent this a little bit so that it's better, right? So where's the indent? Anyways. Yeah, and then what you do is you write a short description. You don't have to get into details. Just write a short description of what this means, right, in this section. And then you just write what the priority is, right? You need to essentially, towards the end of this session, towards the end of sprint 0, this will go on for like 4 weeks, 4 to 6 weeks, depending on what has been determined by the management. This will go on for 4 or 6 weeks. Towards the end of the 5th or 6th week, you should be able to identify what the priority is for these line items that need to be developed in sprint 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, or 7. And then you give a short description, and you should just say what the priority is. Whether it's high, medium, low.
I have a question.
Yeah, go ahead.
So for the priority thing, so who decides the priority? Is the business analyst who is gathering the requirements decides the priority, or in a meeting, who is going to do what assigns the priority?
Okay, that's a good question. So the priority is always determined by the product owner or the product manager. So the product owner and the product manager are individuals who are defining the requirements, right? They are defining what the requirement should be. The business analyst is eliciting the requirements from the product owner, right? So as a business analyst, some companies call them as product owners. Some of them call them as product managers. Some of them call these folks as subject matter experts. Because when you go to an organization, right? So going back to this example over here that I had, yeah. So the operations team at BlackRock Asset Management, there will be a director of operations, or there will be a manager of operations. So the manager of operations or the director of operations are the subject matter experts. They would know everything and anything about the operations of BlackRock. How do they open an account? How do they terminate an account? How do they update a contact? How do they delete a contact associated to General Motors? Or as a business analyst, you're engaging the subject matter experts in the operations team at BlackRock Asset Management, who would be the product owner essentially. And they will be able to tell you what the priority is for the items that you're planning to develop.
Okay.
You should, yeah, but rather than as from an advisory capacity, right? So you're going into a project as a consultant, as an advisor, right? You can, some product owners, what they love is that you should be able to help the product owners assign a priority. You should be able to assist them, right? Going into a meeting and asking them, hey, Sachin, what's the priority for all of these? And Sachin's not going to come into that meeting and say, well, it's high, it's medium, it's low. You need to kind of assist Sachin in determining what the priority should be, right? So for example, if you say that the priority of this is medium and the priority of this is high, right? You should be able to gauge and then engage the product owner and say, but don't you think that we should be developing the form first before retrieving the data? And if that is the case, don't you think that the priority for submitting the form is much higher than that of retrieving the form, which is much lower? So you need to engage them, and then they would come back to you saying that, you know what, actually you're right. Retrieving data is not much of a priority for us. So why don't you put that as medium and make the submit form as high, right? Don't leave it as a close-ended question. What is the priority of this? Is it high? Is it low? Is it medium? You don't do it that way. You kind of engage them into a conversation.
Okay, so that means like we can also give the inputs while assigning the priority.
Yeah, let them assign the priority, but you need to kind of engage them into the right priority. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah. Good question. Okay, and then in the description section, you just give a very high level description, slightly higher level description. So what happens is towards the end of sprint 0, you may come up with 100 line items, right? Now, from there, what you do is, okay. So what you do then is you take all the highs, right? You take all the high requirements, and then you put them into sprint 1, right? You take all the medium ones and you put that into sprint 2. You take all the you take all the lows and you put them into sprint 3. I'm just giving an example of how it will flow into sprint 1, 2, and 3, right?
Samir, also, like, how about the dependency? You cannot really retrieve the form before you submit the form. So that also has to take in the dependencies, because one thing is dependent on the other, right?
Correct. Absolutely. So, correct. One thing is dependent, right? Absolutely. One thing is dependent on the other. So you also identify the dependencies. I mean, there will be another column here where you identify dependencies.
Have you guys heard about blockers?
Oh yes, road blockers.
Right, blockers.
Yeah.
So you can identify that, like, you cannot really review the form. That's a submit. It's a the blocker, and then put that number, who is blocking who. So that way, you can form like
Okay.
Well, is this called as the business requirement?
What we're looking at right now?
Uh-huh.
These are high level business requirements.
Okay.
Yeah, you will start gathering detailed level business requirements, and you will be creating detailed acceptance criteria, exception conditions, edge cases, alternative scenarios, all of that in these sprints.
Amir, can you write down what you just 4 things? That was very amazing, whatever you said. Like,
yeah. I'll write into this, and don't worry. I know we'll go on for at least over.
No, but I think I want to write that. What is that? What is that?
Yeah, I'll write it. I'm gonna be creating one of those. So
okay.
Yeah, we're still like 35,000 feet up in the sky right now. We're not into the forest yet.
Okay.
35,000 feet. We've not landed yet. So we'll get into that. So you're still here, right? You're still in sprint 0, right? And so in sprint 0, you are gathering just enough requirements. You're gathering just enough data to ascertain what the priority is going to be, what the level of effort is going to be, what are some of the high-level dependencies, who are the owners for these processes, like who are the product owners for some of these processes. So you're essentially in the discovery phase, for lack of a better word, you are in discovery. You're discovering what needs to be developed in your future sprints. So you're not actually getting into all of those details right now, okay? Now, you're just identifying just enough to get the ball rolling in the future sprint. Now, in level of effort, what you do is you quickly touch base with the developer. The developer may or may not be in some of these discovery sessions, depending on the project that you're on, but you may have one dev lead who will be with you. And then you actually have another session with one of your development leads, and you identify hey, we need to create an application form. We need to create a form. It's got like 350 fields in it, and it's got like around 10 sections in it. So what you can do is, yeah. So you have like 350 fields here, right? And it's got 10 sections, right? The user will be going through 10 sections in an application form, just like when you're opening up an account at a bank, you have to fill out an application form. Think of it that way, right? So this is a sales guy who is filling out 350 fields, 10 sections for General Motors, who's their customer, and General Motors is investing how much? $100 million into a mutual funds for BlackRock, and you work as an analyst for BlackRock. So you write that description again at a high level. And then you go and engage the developer and says, hey, how long is it going to take? What do you think is very high level approximate? The developer is going to, you don't have to get into details. How long is it going to take to develop this? And he might say, to develop this form, it's probably going to take 3 months, right? Just write down 3 months over here, right? You can write the story points later, right? You can then correlate how much of this 3 months is what the story points is. Submitting the form, well, that's going to take for me, a day to develop. Retrieving data from the form, 3 days, maybe 2 days, 3 days, 3 days, 3 days. You just keep retrieving data. Might be a heavier lift, so then you've got to develop APIs and all that crap. So pardon my language, but then that might take 30 days, right? So you come up with a high level level of effort, as well. Don't forget that. And then you identify the dependencies. Well, this is dependent on this. Delete is dependent on, well, update, which review is dependent on this. So you just find out what's dependent on each, and then you write those dependencies over here. Like, for example, this is dependent on 4, or this is dependent on 1, or this is dependent on 3, and so on and so forth. Right? Who the product owner is, right? The name of the product owner. So when you get into a project, if you're joining from sprint 0, this is some kind of a simple Excel sheet that you can propose that you're going to create. You can propose creating this Excel sheet to the management. Now let's get into and then exchange data with external partners, right? You also are sending all of this data to an external partner called State Street. And State Street is is considered to be an out. Well, for lack of a better word, I'm just going to go back to and feel free to interrupt me. Right. So remember what I said here. This is the client, General Motors. BlackRock Asset Management is where you're working, and we are managing General Motors as mutual funds investment. And then there's something called State Street. A lot of parties involved. State Street is what custodian. In other words, what State Street does is that it manages all of the reporting aspects of this entire transaction. Between General Motors and BlackRock, it manages all the paperwork, reporting, and all of that. Because BlackRock is not good at reporting. It doesn't have any reporting functions. They do not manage paperwork. So State Street does that on BlackRock's behalf. BlackRock has outsourced the reporting aspect to State Street. So we have State Street. So we also have to send whatever data we fill out, this 300 fields or so, right? State Street might say, hey, out of that 300 fields, I need data for 100 fields. You're going to send that data over to State Street via an API, correct? So you also have, and that's the reason why you are essentially exchanging data with external partners. You go to the developer and say, hey, that's going to take us like 3 months, to develop that. So at a high level, your first step is to create the backlog. Any questions so far with regards to creating the backlog?
Okay, I have a question.
Yeah.
So how about project charter? What's that then?
See, also project charter, we used to actually work on that back in the day. Like I haven't worked on a project charter for the last 7-8 years, to be honest with you.
Oh, okay. So we don't use that anymore. Like it's a format, right?
It used to be, it is something that we used to use in the waterfall days.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
And it is used now, but it's not used in as detailed as it should be, like how it was used back in the day. Like back in the day, a project charter would be like a 30 or 40 page document.
Mm-hmm.
And today, I've seen project charters that are like 5 pages or 10 pages. And in some projects, I've not even seen it. Like at least I'm not involved in the development of a project charter.
Okay.
Typically, it's the program manager, the person managing the entire program, who gets involved in creating of a project charter. Also, so you have program manager, right? Generally, it's the program manager. This person is handling the entire program. This entire implementation is handled by the program manager, right? Typical designations I'm just writing over here. There are many, and so the program manager, before you even get onto the project, sometimes as a PA or as a project manager, the project charter has already been created and it's already done. It's already signed. Sometimes it's been done even before you get onto the project. Now, there are instances where you may be asked to develop a project charter. For example, in my most recent project, I was asked to create a project charter, but it took me like a day to complete it. I spent a day working on that project charter and I was done with it. Sometimes it takes, at least 7-8 years ago, it used to take at least a month to create that project charter. It would go through multiple review cycles with folks and stuff. But in Agile projects, Agile is minimum documentation. The meaning of Agile itself is minimum documentation. You don't do any documentation because you're just doing some minimum documentation to get the ball rolling. So I would not be concerned too much about a project charter.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. So, okay. And by the way, this is an Excel sheet that I created. Sometimes what happens is you would have to create this backlog so once you write this in an Excel sheet, you would have to create these in Jira, in your backlog, and assign a priority, the level of effort, and all this will change, by the way, guys. The priority might change, the level of effort might change, dependency might change, but you need something in your backlog to get the ball rolling, right? You need to be able to tell the management how long this project is going to take to develop, right? And you need a high level 30,000 feet view before you go to the forest, before you go down, or before you land your plane. You need this view, or else if you straight away go to the sprints, right, that view is missing. Do you guys agree?
Yeah.
Straight away, if you go to the sprint, would you get that sprint 0 view that I just showed you? You won't get that, right? So you might be here, you might be on this exchange data with external partners. So what happens is, if you are in sprint 3 or sprint 4 as a project, when you start there, then you need to go to the backlog first and see what was developed. Don't just start here. Just speak to your lead BAs or speak to your leads and say, hey, can I just look at the backlog? They will give you access to Jira, and then you go to the Jira and then you see how this is the backlog. And that's how you would get that 30,000 feet view. Okay, Sachin had asked a question earlier about the 4 buzzwords that I used, right? Okay, let's take an example of number 8, exchange data with external partners. Let's take that as an example. We're working on that. That was called as critical to your effort. So you pick that up first, because this is going to take us 3 months. The management decided, hey, without APIs, I cannot exchange data with State Street. And State Street has its own project manager. State Street has its own BA, right? And Backlog, for which you work, has its own BA and project manager. So both your timelines have to kind of merge and be aligned. Both your timelines have to align. So anyways, this is considered critical. So let's get into that, right? Exchange data with external partners, right? So you're essentially writing a description, acceptance criteria. You guys can see my screen, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Samir, unfortunately, I have to go at 10 to start another class. Already delayed by 1 hour.
I'm sorry, that class can wait. I mean, you guys have to be here with us, isn't it?
I already changed their timing from 9 to 10 just so that I can be with you.
That's fine, Sachin. Yeah, you can carry on. This session is recorded, right?
Yes.
Okay, great. Okay, thanks, Sachin.
No.
Okay, I'll be with you all. Okay, so you're essentially writing. So in Jira, I don't have a Jira instance that I can share with you, but when you go to Jira, you'll find this. There will be a description. There will be an exception criteria section. There'll be these two sections over here in Jira. Yeah, okay. Have you all heard about the Gherkin way of writing descriptions? Have you all heard about Gherkin? Slice and dice? Anyone?
Yeah. Like, is it what we used to write user stories? Like, it's a template, like, as a user, I should, so that.
Yeah. So
is that the one?
It's the way you write. It's the way you write user stories. Yeah, you're kind of close. There are
Isn't,
different.
isn't Gherkin like it's a behavior BDD, driven development?
Yes, yes, that's right. Behavior test driven development. So, I mean, I've been writing Gherkin in Gherkin format for a couple of few years now. Doesn't matter as long as you're able to convey what the business has asked you to develop and what the developers are developing are correct. That's fine, but don't get too bogged down with the method that in which you're writing it. I was just asking casually, but let me kind of explain you. Okay, how to write. So, what are we talking about? We're talking about the sales team wanting to submit a form to onboard general motors. Okay. Let's try to do that with Gherkin. Where was I? Okay. This is just a description. Given the sales team, why is it coming bold? Okay. Given the sales team at Backlog is filling out a form.
Samir, please save this. Don't delete it and send it to me. Okay, so I'll send it to everyone.
Okay.
I see that you haven't saved it. It's so just save it first.
Okay. I mean, this is just some of my running notes. It's a crappy document.
No, we want it. Okay.
Okay. Where was I?
It might be crap for you, but it's gold for us, you know.
True that.
Okay. I lost my train of thought.
Yeah.
You still on? You're not going away.
And I'm leaving. Bye bye.
Okay. You can be. Feel free to be here. But what was I? Okay. Yeah.
Yeah, given when then.
Given the sales team is filling out the onboarding form, filling out and submitting the onboarding form, then data pertaining to the form should be sent to State Street. Oh, well, see, there's a way of writing it. Given the sales team is filling out, the filling was right, filling out the onboarding form. And when I submit the form, then data pertaining to the form is sent to. Okay. So given the sales team is filling out the onboarding form, when the sales team submits the form, see, you have to go kind of back and forth sometimes. Then data pertaining to the form is sent over to State Street. Now, when a developer reads this, Sachin, are you still there?
No, he left.
Okay. So can someone just read this out?
Yeah, sure. So
Yeah.
given the sales team is filling out the onboarding form at Appian, when the sales team submits the form in Appian, then data pertaining to the form is sent over to State Street.
Okay, great. So think about a developer, right? A developer may not know all the details that you have in your minds that you have gathered from the business. Developers have not been on those calls. The developers may be really far away from that business process and the business know-how. The developer may also be offshore in India, or he may be onshore. He may not be on site. Maybe you've got now today in remote working days. So when you read this, right, when the developer reads it, it's very easy. He gets a 30,000 feet view immediately, right? He gets that 30,000 feet view immediately in terms of, oh, okay, so given the sales team is filling out the onboarding form in Appian, when the sales team submits the form in Appian, then data pertaining to the form is sent over to State Street. Oh, okay, I see what you're saying. So he got that understanding right away of what's happening here, right? In simple language. So yeah, so that's kind of the description that you should start off with, right? And then the acceptance criteria. Don't write happy flow in your acceptance criteria. I'm just writing here. Oh, it's already written, sorry. I already wrote that there. Okay, don't write happy flow, alternative flow, and exception. These three things, you don't have to write it specifically. It used to be written in waterfall days back in the day. Today, we don't write it like this. We just write bullet points. But your bullet point should cover these three, okay? That's the reason okay. So, and when you're writing an acceptance criteria, make sure one line is user, the second line is system. I'll show her. So it's user system, okay? As I said, a use case is a typical interaction between the user and the system, okay? So start off with the user. User submits, simple lines. You don't have to write big biblical stories and stuff, okay? User submits.
Samir, is this use case, this whole thing, is that what you call use case?
Yes, correct. Yeah, it is.
Like a, okay, I'll wait for you till you finish. No, I'm confused. I'm confused between this use case, the business plan. I mean, they are quite often used interchangeably, so I'm not sure exactly what is what.
Yeah. Basically,
maybe.
Yeah.
Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah. So yeah, I'll explain that.
Yeah, that's fine. I was that's what I was saying. Maybe we can discuss that at the end.
Use case is basically what is a typical interaction between a user and a system. So an action taken by a user and how the system responds to that action. That is nothing but a use case. Okay. So when you go to withdraw money at an ATM, right? You are performing an action. And what is that action? The action could be that you're entering your PIN code on the ATM dial-up pad, correct? When you put card in and then you enter, or sorry, even before that, you stand in front of the ATM. The first thing that you do, what is the first thing that you do in front of the ATM? So like you're at an ATM right now, you want to withdraw money. So what is the first action that you perform?
I think
insert a card.
Get started. There is an option on the screen.
Yeah, but even before get started, you insert your card, right? Like.
Okay. Yeah.
So as a user, you took your card out of your wallet and you insert. So you perform that action, right?
Right.
The user inserts. I'll explain that. So user inserts a card in an ATM, and what does the ATM do? What does the ATM? What is the ATM's response to that?
It asks for the PIN or what is it, a credit or a debit? Yeah.
Absolutely. So ATM displays a screen asking if it's a debit or credit transaction, or even before that, right? So ATM displays a screen to enter the PIN code, correct? So user inserts a card in the ATM. ATM displays a screen to enter the PIN code. What happens after that? So the user inserts a card in an ATM, then ATM displays a screen to enter the pin code, then what is the next?
It asks to take out the card sometimes, and sometimes it works with the card.
Well, the user is entering the pin code. Correct?
Yeah. Yeah.
Or what happens after the user enters the pin code?
It asks about what we have to do, whether saving credit, savings account, checking account.
Correct. But you have to kind of detail it down to a much granular level.
Okay.
So basically, user enters the pin code. ATM
Accepts or rejects it.
Rejects pin code, right? Yeah. So let's assume it accepts, right?
Okay.
So, okay, ATM accepts or enters the pin code. And then what happens after that?
If it accepts, then it goes to the screen where it gives the option what we want to do, whether we want to deposit money or withdraw money, if it accepts that.
Okay. And displays
multiple options. Okay.
Or withdrawal, whatever.
Yeah.
Options.
And if it rejects, it will ask to enter the pin code again or try again the whole thing.
Right. So let's do the accept first. Accepts the pin code and displays a deposit, and then user enters either user clicks on either deposit or withdrawal. ATM. So, I mean, ATM displays deposit screen. So you know what I saw, essentially what I'm going through right now, as you can see, user system.
Yeah, got it. No.
System, user system. So
Used
typical interaction between a user and a system. So you write it this way. When you write something, you always write it this way. You know? User system, user system. Now what happens with your, this is the accept, correct? So what you do is that the accept part, you put it under the happy flow. There was a reject, right? You also called out reject, remember? So you said reject.
Yeah.
The reject, you put that as an alternative flow. Okay. And let's say when you user enters a card in an ATM, displays pin code, user enters pin code. There's another one here, user enters incorrect pin code, right? So the incorrect pin code, you kind of put it as an exception. Well, that's not really a direct, that's also an alternative flow actually. So the incorrect pin code is also an alternative flow. Okay, but user enters correct pin code, but system displays error, right? Now users entering the correct pin code, but the system displays an error. So that's an edge. That's sort of an exception condition, sort of an error condition actually, that kind of never really happens, but it could happen, you know, because the user may enter the correct pin code, but system displays an error because the card has expired. You know? So what you do is, first you write it this way, and it's good we're discussing this. You know, first you just write it this way, irrespective of whether it's a happy flow, alternative flow, or an exception condition, right? And then what you do is you kind of move the first 3 into your happy flow. You move these 2 into your exception condition. You take these, the accept, just take the accept part, and you move that in your happy flow, right? And then there was a reject part. System rejects something, right? I forgot what it was. It accepts the pin code and displays. Okay, then ATM rejects. Okay, and then you have this. Okay. So did you all get an understanding of the happy flow, alternative flow, and exception condition?
Yeah.
Okay, essentially, yeah. So, but the happy flow, alternative flow, and exception condition in Agile, you don't write this down, okay? And all you have is description and acceptance. It will all come under acceptance criteria. Okay, and your stories shouldn't be. You see how these are in bulleted forms? It should be easy to read, and it shouldn't be like biblical. It should be like detailed sentences and all that stuff. You don't need that. Okay. So it's easier to read, and it should be in small chunks. Anyways, I gave an ATM example. Actually, I was going to explain something else. It's about the onboarding form. So is it okay if I continue?
I'm okay. I don't know about others.
Yeah, anything is fine.
Okay.
So when you said stories, are these stories as well?
These are nothing but stories.
So you call them use case as well and stories as well, business plan as well. That's why I was asking.
No, business plan, we don't call it a business plan.
Okay, so use case and use story. Okay.
We used to use use case in waterfall days very often.
Okay.
Stories is more an agile term.
Okay.
Use case is more a waterfall term, but
all right.
A use case is also used holistically in waterfall, agile, any other method.
Okay.
Yeah, when you go to a business, the business might ask you, hey, what use case are we discussing? You know,
Okay.
so you have to say that we are discussing the ATM use case.
Okay. All right.
Right?
Got it.
Yeah.
Okay.
So that's essentially it is what it is. We're using the ATM use case.
All right.
Yeah. When you wouldn't say that we're discussing the ATM use. We can say ATM user story also, but ATM use case means you're discussing the entire use case of the ATM, which be a one-year project. Okay.
Okay.
Okay. So let's talk about this description here, right? So where was I? Just going to go quickly. So yeah. So given the sales team is filling out the onboarding form, when the sales team submits the form in Appian, then data to the form is sent over to State Street. So it's the same thing, you know, user fills out and submits form in Appian, right? State Street, user fills out and submits form in Appian. Request ID is generated. It's an ID. When you have you all noticed whenever you fill out a form somewhere, when you click on the form or you submit a form, there's some ID that's generated, right? Right, guys? So that's what this is. So have you gone through that? So when you fill out an application form, either at a bank or
usually we get a reference ID or
right, absolutely, or you even submit an order on Amazon, you get an order ID.
Yeah, right.
So user fills out and submits a form in Appian. Request ID is generated. State Street receives data pertaining to the request ID. Okay, now
so now
I'm going to want this to be, yeah, now can you all, yeah, go ahead. Sorry, what was it?
Hello.
Yeah, what was the question?
Yeah, so now State Street is a system.
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah. So let me ask you this. So user is filling out, there are, in terms of the actors, right? There are three actors, right? One is Backlog. Appian is the system that they're using. That's sending data to State Street. State Street also has an Appian. We don't care what system State Street has. It could have bigger, but we don't care what system they have. Our scope is here. Your scope is to send data to them, and State Street is sending something back to Backlog.
Sorry to
So
interrupt.
there are two actors here. Yeah, go ahead.
So yeah, I kind of missed what was State Street again. Was it a client? What was that?
Sure. So you have General Motors, which is
As a client.
Yeah, that's the client investing $100 million.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, one second. General Motors investing 100 million in BlackRock mutual fund. Okay, this is General Motors is the client.
Okay. Yeah.
BlackRock is
Us.
the asset management firm, right?
Yeah.
This is like BlackRock is managing General Motors' $100 million.
Okay.
And State Street is the custodian. Custodian as in General Motors expects to receive a report every day on how their mutual funds are doing. Are they making money? Are they making losses? They need to report every day. So BlackRock does not send them a report, because BlackRock's core competence is investing in assets, right? They're not good in reporting. So what they've done is BlackRock has outsourced the reporting requirements of General Motors to State Street. So State Street handles all of the reporting.
It's like a third party here.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
State Street sends, State Street, yeah, that's right. State Street is the third party. State Street provides all reports pertaining to their investment. They send it directly to General Motors.
Okay.
Yeah, but for State Street to send that report to General Motors, they need to get some data, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like, what do they send back to them? We're sending that data to State Street. So if you look at the sequence, right? There's something called a sequence diagram that you all will have to draw, right? This is the sequence, but you can create that sequence diagram pretty quickly. I don't have Visio here. This is like a home laptop, so it's very intuitive, but you should create a sequence diagram. Just pick it up. This. As in this way. Okay, so this entire thing can be done in a sequence diagram. Like You edit as text. I don't know, it doesn't open up, but in Visio, you can do something like this. And then if you click on this arrow, it opens up a text box where you can say send data, receive data. This entire thing that I'm just kind of, that I've explained here, these arrows here, you can do it as form as a sequence diagram in Visio. So it's easier to understand the interaction that way.
Okay, got it.
Yeah, yeah. But then these are the actors. The actors are BlackRock and State Street. General Motors is not an actor. General Motors is just a client, right? So, okay, State Street receives data pertaining to the request. What happens then after that?
Straight Street sends back the report to the BlackRock. That's the final result. But for now,
so let's see, users filling out and submits a form in Appian, a request ID is generated. State Street receives data pertaining to the request ID. What happens? State Street
would save that data.
No, it actually acknowledges that the data is received.
Okay.
Correct? Right? Users filling out and submitting a form in Appian. State Street receives data pertaining to the request ID and sends back acknowledgement to user. User at BlackRock. User at BlackRock fills out and submits a form in Appian. State Street receives data pertaining to the request ID and sends back acknowledgement to BlackRock, okay, that we have received your request. And then, isn't that simple? The user is the user at BlackRock fills out and submits a form in Appian. Request ID is generated. State Street receives the data pertaining to the request and sends back an acknowledgement to BlackRock. Is there anything missing here? You can split these into two. Always don't see. I know the best way of doing this is user system, but sometimes it may not be in that sequence. If it doesn't make, you can continue with user system. State Street sends back acknowledgement to BlackRock. What happens next? User at BlackRock receives acknowledgement. Receives State Street's acknowledgement. Think about this from a real life scenario, right? When you're filling out an order in Amazon, you are submitting it, you receive an order ID, correct? You receive it back.
Mm-hmm.
This is something very similar. User at BlackRock fills out and submits a form in Appian. Request ID is generated. State Street receives data pertaining to the request ID. State Street sends back acknowledgement to BlackRock, because you should also know, right, whether that they have received it or not. So you need an acknowledgement back also. This is nothing but you getting an order ID, right? So with State Street ID. Okay, so you basically what's happening here is that BlackRock generates an ID. State Street is also generating their ID. Okay, so what happens? You need to reference both IDs. So this is ID number 1, and State Street generates ID number 2. 1 correlates to 2. Did you all understood that, right? So that, that 2 IDs generated. So BlackRock generates an ID. State Street also generates an ID. So BlackRock gets so State Street gets ID number 1, and then BlackRock gets this 2 back from State Street. So essentially, that's what it means. So that is essentially kind of an happy flow. User at BlackRock receives State Street acknowledgement. So that's fine. It ends. This is actually a happy flow. So that was sort of a kind of a high level example. And then you have alternative flow also, right? You have many things that could be that, stage 3 rejects. Same like the ATM, stage 3 rejects. And then BlackRock provides the stage 3 reject. BlackRock receives the rejection. BlackRock resends the form. State Street accepts and sends acknowledgement. So that's an alternative flow, right? So in there, and then you essentially have a lot of exception conditions here as well, edge cases that you call it. See, what I'm going through all of this because this is the core aspect of what you guys will be working on. There are a lot of other things that you guys will be working on. This is the meat of it. Exception conditions are BlackRock submits request. State Street sends back an error. An error could be request not submitted in format that is expected by State Street. So these are essentially requirements that you will capture from the users, from the product owners, right? Okay, before I proceed, any questions so far?
I'm good.
So in first sprint, there might be 4 to 5 backlogs that we decide to work on that particular first 2 weeks. So we have to come up with all these subtopics for every use case or use story. You know what I'm saying? Like for every point, we have to come out with these 4 criteria.
That is correct. That is correct. But that is correct, absolutely. But
okay,
yeah, create an application form, right? Because of lack of, I just have like an hour to explain these things, right? So create an application form is not like a story that you will be working on, right? So let's say even submitting a form, there are like 10 sections in the form, right? Give me a minute. For some reason, I'm not, oh, there you go. Try to indent it. Okay, so you guys are aware of epic features and stories? Are you guys aware of that?
Yeah.
Okay, so what happens? So I'm just writing items here. Okay, these are items. Okay, so for example, so this is an epic, creating an application form. Like the entire project itself is going to take the entire project maybe to create this, right? So it's an epic. It's a very high level epic, right? So this is a feature. So you won't be working on in Jira to create, you want this entire thing over here, happy flow, alternative flow, exception. By the way, you don't write this in the acceptance criteria. These I'm just written that to explain that to you. Okay. So you will be creating all of that at the story level. So whatever I just explained is at the story level. So you see this, you're creating an application form. Now you need to submit a form. The form has 10 sections. So you're working on the first section. There are like 12 sections, actually 12 sections to this form. And you are actually working on a user story, which is the first section. And that could be client address. What is the address of the client, right? Client phone number. Get what I'm saying, right? So you have to write a story for the address. You have to write a story for the phone. You have to write a story for, and again, the story is nothing but that use case that I kind of explained. You can call it as use case also if you want to. I mean, different folks will tell it differently in the industry, right? But for the purpose of this explanation, you can say that this is a use case. It's got the happy flow, alternative flow, and the exception condition. Okay, does it make more sense now? Now that I've explained it at a higher level?
Yeah.
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 Okay.
Yeah.
So you're writing a happy flow, alternative flow exception for each story, actually. And these are small stories. Okay, they're small chunks like this. Like for example, that was the, yeah. Like for example, your first story maybe, this is typical. This is the ATM example, and it is the story might be inserting a card. That's it. You know, we're just working on a story of inserting a card. What happens after you insert the card? You see how small this is? This is not that big. You know, that will be you insert the card, and there are many other things in an ATM.
Right.
There will be all of these. So it, and then you will have a priority for all of these also.
So what would be the epic for the ATM example?
Epic for the ATM will be ATM. I mean,
withdrawal.
Okay.
Like
Okay.
Yeah, I mean,
cash
yeah,
withdrawal.
yeah. So typically, what you have in Jira are these three hierarchies:
Epic
epic, feature, and story. Yeah.
Epic features. Okay.
Yeah.
Task and subtask.
Yeah. Then stories can be divided into tasks and subtasks, right?
Okay.
No, stories can be divided. Stories are nothing but your requirements. There's happy flow, alternative flow, exception conditions. Each story will have that, but don't mention this in your.
Okay. I remember a Jira having epic story, task, bug or defect. Do they have feature as well? Maybe I.
You're right. Some Jiras do not have feature.
Okay. All right.
In which case, then you have to adjust, right?
Okay. Got it. I kind of get an idea now. Epic is like the bigger overview requirement.
Right. Now, and depends on how, it's up to you. Depends on how you do it. Now, there could be 10 epics, or there could be 20 epics.
Okay.
You know, you have to find out.
Got it. Kind of. Yeah, this helps definitely. Thanks.
Yeah, you have to find out how many months is considered to be an epic, and then you create that.
Okay.
Right. Suppose if someone says that 1 year is equal to one epic, then, and if the project is 1 year, then you'll have like you know, one epic, something along those lines. So take it down. Typically in a project will have like 20-30 epics. Features may not be there, so you kind of have to do it.
All right.
Yeah. And so that's how it is. Basically, that's what, are you guys, by any chance, so what's your role? Are you BA, or are you a PM, or you're a product owner, or are you a product?
No work experience.
Okay, so you're a BA, right? You're essentially, you're training to be a BA, is that right?
trained
PM
to be
and BA. Yeah.
What's that?
PM and BA.
Oh, okay.
PM or
So,
BA. Yeah.
Okay. So for what this is one of the most important things that you guys will be doing as BAs is to work on user stories. Okay. And
Okay.
yeah. So when you go to Jira, you will only see description and acceptance criteria. Okay. So when you're writing it, you write it like this. Okay. You write it like this, but then you remove this happy flow, alternative flow, exception. Just remove those headers, and just make it one. You understand my point, right?
Yeah.
I only wrote that so that I could explain it to you.
Mhm.
So essentially what happens is your happy flows and your exception conditions is in that small story itself. Continued numbering. I don't know why it's not working. Anyways, so yeah, so this is your story. This is typically what your size should be of a story, right? And then you move on to kind of the next story like that. Your happy flow, alternative flow and exception conditions should be there in each story, because the developer will ask you alternative flows. What happens if this does? What happens if this happens? If this happens, if those are all your alternative and kind of thing. So just to kind of summarize, what I've explained to you guys today is, how to create a backlog, right? To get started with, how to list the items, how to list high-level descriptions. What is this? What are the type of these items? How to get the priority out? What is the level of effort? How long are you guys going to take to develop this? Any dependencies, owner, and status. Once you develop this high-level thing in sprint 0, then in the future sprints 1, 2, 3, 4, you start working on your acceptance criteria, happy for all. So that essentially is kind of an end-to-end, how you work with user stories. And then there is, when you're doing this, right? When you're creating, this Excel sheet looks kind of simple. This is not all that you do in sprint 0. You also document what is the target state flows, target state process flows. You have to diagram what are the target state process flows as well, in parallel to creating this Excel sheet in sprint 0. So after 4 weeks or 6 weeks of sprint 0, and by the way, you guys may never be there in sprint 0 also. You never know, but sometimes you are in sprint 0. In this 4 to 6 weeks, you have to document the business process flow by using Visio. Target state. What is that the business wants in the future? So you have to document that, create swim lanes and all that. Okay, any questions, guys?
Go ahead.
Go ahead. Yeah, go ahead.
All right. So I was wondering, how is the BA responsible for figuring out the scheduling timeline and the budget as well, or that's completely PM?
No, that would be the program manager or the PM. Yeah.
Okay. All right.
Definitely, you're not getting involved in budgets and all that stuff.
So is that something?
Scheduling. Oh, sorry. So 2 things you asked me: budget and schedule. Budget, mostly it's going to be the program manager or some higher level folks who are working on those things.
Okay.
Either the program manager or the project manager, but mostly the program manager is going to be budget.
Mm-hmm.
As far as schedule is concerned, yes, BAs do get involved in the scheduling, which is what here we identified, right? The level of effort.
Right. Okay.
Yeah,
So
that's nothing but you come up with the total level of effort, and how much time it's
So
going.
this is why, by discussing with the developers, like taking their input on that. We cannot
Right,
just
right.
guess, right? We have to discuss and
No.
then
You
come up
don't.
with a timeline.
Absolutely. You just have to ask the developers how much.
Okay.
It's
All right. Okay.
You've got some experience, then you can put a tentative timeline here if the
All
developer
right.
around. Yeah. Always go to a meeting with some homework. Like always go to a meeting with when you go to a meeting. Sorry, let me ask. We have like 10 minutes for questioning. So you just go ahead for questions. Yeah, go ahead with all your questions.
I'm okay. Neha, you can go ahead.
Okay. So no, I just can we do this in actual Jira? Like, can we just create a fake project and then we can just make user stories and all that stuff? Is that possible?
Yeah. I mean, ask Sachin if he can get a trial version of Jira setup. I think you can get a trial version of Jira.
Oh yeah. It's free, and actually we did once in Jira.
Yeah.
So
We do have one actually.
Yeah, we do have one.
Yeah. So essentially, when you go there, right, in Jira, when you're going to Jira, as I said, right, all your writing is, you have a description section, right, where you are writing this one. There you go. These are the two sections you have in Jira. You have a description section where you're writing this part, and then you have the acceptance criteria where you're writing this. That's it.
Yeah.
Okay. And you're engaging. So this is one part, and yeah, that's right. Then there is a section on the right-hand side that says priority. There will be a priority section also in Jira. Yeah, it'll be better if we can.
If we can do it in a real Jira, so it would be great. Like we can just assign priority. Like as far as I remember, some things we mention it in Excel size, like T-shirt size, they say.
Right.
And then some of the user points we give it in Fibonacci series. So like that stuff. So we can just have an actual view of what Jira looks like and how we can do all this stuff.
Right.
Like maybe for next class.
We can continue with that. Yeah,
sure.
Like story points and all that.
Correct. Yeah, we can.
Okay.
Any other questions?
I'm okay, actually. It's more about we need to feel how it actually works when we go to work. We should be able to, be confident to put it in Jira. So that's what we really have to know.
Yeah. That's right. I mean, that's pretty easy actually. What I want you all to focus more on, see, Jira is nothing but a platform that is enabling you to do something. Right? Whether it's Jira or Excel or any other platform, these are enablers, right? So don't be bogged down about these enablers, because enablers will always change. You'll have Jira in one project, you may have some other platform in some other.
Yeah. Right.
So don't worry about that. What I want you to focus on is your happy flow, alternate flow, exception conditions, and the way you engage the business to gather these.
Is there like a template for what questions we should ask in the requirement meeting? Or
template? There's no template. It's you have to, when you go to a requirements meeting, just jot down the list of questions that you're going to ask the business. That's it, before going to the meeting. You should have those list of questions in your notepad, in your Word document, and don't show the business those questions. You just have to ask them that. But you can never go to a meeting which is perfectly scripted like a movie, where a hero or you have a heroine who are actually saying something from a script, right? Those 10 questions that you have in your notepad is a script, but that script is not going to go according to plan. So you may, because the business may have subsequent questions to your questions.
Okay.
But that's just to kind of help you get some confidence. But going to a meeting, the second most important thing what I want to say to you, the business is actually looking forward to you to advise them. Okay. Some folks, the businesses will not know all of these details. They don't know what a use case is. They may not know what does acceptance criteria stand for. Or they may not know what this Gherkin, all this stuff is. Okay, they know what the requirements are. They'll just give you the requirements. They'll give you this part. They'll give you this part. This part. So when you go to a meeting, when you get some adequate amount of experience, never go to a meeting. So as a business analyst, myself, right? I don't go to a meeting with a clean slate. Like, I always write it down, write whatever I know about. When you have a few weeks of experience or maybe a couple of months of experience into the project, you need to go into the meeting with the happy flow, with the alternative flow, with the exception conditions, and then you are just actually kind of reviewing with the business what you have already drafted. So you have to draft something at a high level and go into the meeting. But if you go with, let's say, nothing here or nothing here, or nothing here, that's still fine. But that may take a long time for the business to come up. And you have like an hour or 2 hours of meetings, and you cannot actually elicit everything if you have nothing written on your Word document. So,
okay. So if I'm talking, see, if it happens tomorrow, I am working, and a business comes to me and say like the ATM machine that you were talking about. So I am just wondering whether I will know enough questions to ask them, or when the meeting ends up, when we are working on making the document, that is when I will realize, oh, I forgot to ask this and I forgot to ask that. Then what would happen?
Oh, no, you will be having recurring meetings with them. You will be having like an hour or two. You may have an hour a day with them. So you can ask them in your subsequent meeting.
Okay, all right.
Right. You'll always ask them in your subsequent meeting. That's fine. I mean, if you miss out on questions, this is not like there's no deadline that's happening the following day. So
I thought I was wondering if that keeps happening, it would be too bothering for the business to keep answering me every other time. So I would have to be prepared.
One thing you need to realize is that, let's take an example of this section, right? Okay. Let's say there are more forms, right? Yeah, I'm going to get to your question now. I'm going to answer your question. Yeah. One thing is that let's assume the sprint is starting after 2 weeks. Okay. The sprint 0 is over. The sprint 0 gone. Yeah, your sprint 0 is over, right? Sprint 1 is starting after 2 weeks, right? So when the sprint 1 starts, right, you will have, let's assume you have 5 developers, or no, let's assume you have 3 developers in your team, right? And the 3 developers will tell you that, hey, you know what, we have enough capacity to do up to section 9 in the next sprint, right? They might come back. They'll tell you that, hey, folks, we have enough capacity to develop till 9. So what should happen is your story till 9 should be completed. You get my point?
Mm-hmm.
And for your story up till 9 to get completed, you have to get the requirements for the business from the business up till 9. That's how you plan yourself, right? You understand? Okay. If you have any questions, ask me. Please, this is important, that's why. So you are in sprint 0, right? You're done. This 4 weeks is a little, okay. This 4 weeks are over. And sprint 1 is going to start on, let's say, 7th week. I'm just giving an example, 7th week. Or 6th week. 6 is bad example.
Does it mean it takes 4 weeks to just collect or gather requirements?
Oh yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
No, and this is high level requirements.
Okay.
Yeah,
all right. Okay.
Yeah, 4 weeks, sometimes 6 weeks, sometimes 8 weeks.
So what happened? So during this, so every day, do they have meetings every day for collecting requirements?
Yeah. In sprint 0, you are pretty much, you will be in calls pretty much from, let's say, 10 to 4.
Okay, all right.
This is your entire, this is for a 1.5 year project. You're capturing requirements for a 1.5 year project.
Oh, all right. Okay.
In 8 weeks.
All right. Okay.
Right? At a high level, not detailed. Okay. Now, after your 8th week, okay, you are going to start your sprint 1 in the 9th week, or let's use 11th week as an example, right? 9, 10. Okay, sorry, 10 is better. Okay. In sprint 0 ends in the 8th week, and you're going to start your sprint 1 in the 10th week. When I say you're going to start, what do you mean by that? The development is going to start, not you. Development will start. For the development to start, what do you think? The requirements have to be ready, right? For the development to start.
Yeah.
So the developers will tell you, hey, we have enough capacity to take 5 sections of the form. Okay. No one's going to tell you all this, as I'm telling you. I mean, you don't get like when you, some guys will give you a heads up and all that, some folks, but you have to kind of be proactive in asking these questions, like how I'm telling you guys, hey, when does sprint 0 get over? Okay, when does sprint 1 start? Okay, so if sprint 1 is starting, if sprint 0 is getting over in the 8th week, in 8 weeks, and sprint 1 is starting on the 10th week, when do you want the stories to be ready? So they will say that the stories have to be, for the story for this first sprint has to be ready at least by the 9th week, and then you accordingly adjust that, let's say the developers are probably going to say that, hey folks, we can do till 5. So you have to get all the requirements 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 before the 10th week. So at least 9 point, the last day of the 9th week. 9th week requirements should be ready. Requirements in detail should be ready. You get my point, right?
Yeah.
So it's like a reverse engineering the schedule actually.
Okay.
Yeah, that was actually messy. So 4th week, sprint 0 is done, and 7th week the development starts. So on the 7th, by the 7th week, you can say by the 7th week, sprint 1 stories should be detailed out. For that to happen, by the 5th week, you should set up meetings with the business. Between 5th and 7th week, meet with business to gather requirements and detail it out and whatever. You see how I'm doing the scheduling, kind of, right?
Yeah.
So just remember that.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm not overwhelming you guys. I just don't have better examples, so that's why I'm using this 4th week, 6th week, and so. But just remember that. Yeah.
Oh no, that's good. That's good.
Okay. Anything else that you all want to discuss?
Okay.
Right,
Just a question regarding sprint. Like usually they say that sprint should not be like 2 weeks long. Like they say that feedback loop slows down if the sprint is for like 4 weeks.
Generally, it's 2 weeks long, actually.
Yeah. Generally it's 2 week long, right? So if like the sprint is like for 4 weeks, won't the feedback loop get slowed down?
Oh, so sorry, except the sprint 0. Sprint 0 can go between 4 to 8 weeks.
Okay.
The sprints are 2 weeks.
Oh, okay. Or,
Just
okay,
sprint
got it.
zero, because sprint zero,
Yeah.
you're gathering.
Yeah, because we are at the discovery level. Got it.
Right. Now, sometimes you have a scrum master to do all this for you, in which case you will be fine. Sometimes you are the scrum master, you are the BA, you are also, so you may wear multiple hats, right? You might be 30%, you may be 20% PM, or maybe 10% PM, 10% scrum master, and you may be 80% BA, depending on the project.
Okay.
Yeah, so you may have all these, you may wear multiple hats, but in some organizations, there is a scrum master, there is a PM, in which case you're just focusing on being a BA, essentially. My advice is that be a BA, like, 100% of the time when you initially starting your career. And when you get that some experience, then you can start wearing multiple hats.
Okay.
Start off with being a BA. BA is to know that skill set is essential into being a PM. Like, it's very difficult to be a PM without a BA or a developer. So you are a developer, and then you become a PM, or you're a BA, and then you become a PM. So you have to go be a PM from either of these two streams. That's my advice. I mean,
Okay.
I've not come across a PM who's not had BA or dev experience.
Yeah, makes sense.
In my projects, it's like I have not seen a PM who's never been a BA or a developer. So it's kind of very difficult. I have not come across. So.
Okay.
So always, I think, if to make it easier, why don't you just focus on the BA stuff and then maybe branch out into other things later on. Any other questions that you'll have?
No, I'm good.
Okay, there are two books. One is Writing Effective Use Cases by Alistair, Cockburn, I think. Yeah, that's an amazing book. I have to read this book. I cannot stress the importance enough of this book. The other is IT Business Analysis by Harvard Deswa.
Would you recommend us any videos or any particular, any videos on YouTube to look up as well?
I mean, you wouldn't find as much as from YouTube. You won't get that much. I mean,
Okay.
How big is a YouTube video? I mean, 5 minutes, 10 minutes. You wouldn't get much from there. But if you read these two books, you would get a lot, actually.
All right.
Yeah, if you get bogged down anywhere when you're reading this book, just skip that part. You don't have to get bogged down. But I would recommend these two books any day if you want to be a good BA. I read both of them, actually. So it takes you through the entire process. Yeah, so this one. Oh, this is the one. UML for IT business analysts.
Okay.
Either of these two will do. This is also good. Yeah, I mean, they're the same, actually. UML for IT business, a practical guide to object-oriented. Yeah, this is a good one. But if
Which was the first?
Yeah, if you get bogged down somewhere, just skip that part, okay? Don't just like, oh my goodness, I can't understand this stuff. This is also good, the Agile Guide to Business Analysis. The first one is Writing Effective Use Cases. He's considered to be the guru of business analysis. He'll make you, you can write really good use cases when you read his book. Did you get that?
Yes, got it.
Yeah, just get these two books. Yeah. And then a lot of stuff, in terms of just try to manage expectations. There are a lot of things that you will get to know once you get into the field. So, and then there will be a lot of leads with you in the project, right? When you join as a business analyst, they're not going to be putting you as a lead BA from day one. There will be a lead BA with you and you will be working. You just have to shadow this person, and start working, and then eventually you get into that lead position. But all of this stuff that I'm explaining, you may not be involved. You may or you may not be involved. But if someone explains this to you in the project, then you should be able to grasp and understand what they're trying to explain. If a lead BA comes across to you and explains this, hey, can you all start creating 6 user stories for this section? So you should be able to kind of understand what he's trying to say and stuff like that. Eventually you'll get that position where you'll become a lead. Then he would say, hey, why don't you write a user story? Then you should know how to write the description and then acceptance criteria. Remember the happy flows, the alternative flows, and exception conditions. This is what drives your development. Think about it. From all the other important things you are doing, you need to prioritize what you are also working on and what is important for you to work on. Okay, you'll be having 10 things in a project that's going on. Okay, but remember, what is your priority? Your priority is to make sure that you're working on this stuff, okay, and that you work on, let's say, if the developer says, hey, I can take section 1, 2, 3, and 4 in the next sprint. So you have 2 weeks. You have 2 weeks to speak to the business, write down your beautiful stories in that happy flow, alternative flow for these 4 user stories in 2 weeks. That is your priority number 1. Everything else doesn't matter. That'll all follow, so you get what your priority is, right? As a business analyst.
Yeah.
This beautiful format that I just created doesn't matter. Whether you create this in Jira, whether you create it in an Excel sheet, these are all enablers. Use the things that enable you are not as important as long as you're able to tell the developer what they need to develop, right? Okay. So I hope this helped you all.